It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Mike Harbour.
Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. My name is Mike Harbour, and joining me today is my co-host, Paul Gustafson. Hey, Paul, how are you, my friend?
Mike, doing great. It's great to be with you, and excited about our podcast today, and I can't wait to get into this discussion.
Yeah, it's going to be an awesome day. We're kind of starting something a little new today, Paul, as we dive into the book, Breaking Average, for our Breaking Average podcast. So if you're listening and joining us on the Empowered Living Show, make sure you have a copy. You can follow along with us over the next few weeks as we dive into this book. Over the next several episodes, Paul, we're going to take some of the ideas that you put in this book and make them practical for our listeners and our viewers to take out into their life and use in their own leadership, right? Breaking Average, the book was the genesis for the name Breaking Average Podcast, and I'm looking forward to doing that with you and with our guest as well this year, Paul.
Yeah, that's right. And, I appreciate the compliments in terms of the book that I wrote, but I really co-wrote that. It's really a team effort, and we're going to talk about that. But 7 critical factors that we highlight in there. And the word critical is absolutely true. These are critical. You can't just have one. You really need all 7 of these things, and they make a huge difference. And within each factor, there are elements. We're going to unpack those elements. I know we've highlighted the 7 factors that's just at a high level. And we thought, you know what, we got to dive in a little deeper on this thing. And we're going to start with the V word today. So I'm pretty pumped about that one.
Yeah, I love that you kind of bolded in bold print or highlighted this idea of critical, Paul. It reminds me of a lot of discussion in the world when people say you teach those soft leadership skills. And I don't think there's anything soft about leadership. They're really essential leadership skills. And as you say, the factors that you've highlighted in this book, they're critical to team strong leadership. They're not nice to have. They're critical for you to be able to move your team forward. And Paul, when we look back at history and the individual of efforts or teams that stand out from just the average, right? I think of the New England Patriots, whether you're a Patriots fan or not. I'm not really a Patriots fan. I'm a Tom Brady fan who no longer plays for the Patriots, but fantastic NFL football team. Or I hate to say this because Rick lives in Alabama, but the Crimson Tide, right? I mean, and what they've been able to do. And just recently, now that we're recording this after the national title game, Nick Saban becomes the all-time winningest NFL football coach for championships in history.
Or even the goal. You said that right. It's like he is an NFL coach. You said winningest NFL coach in college history.
NCAA coach. Yeah.
But it's like an NFL team. His team could probably, and I know Rick's listening in right now before we really get to Rick and Diane, but I think Alabama could beat a lot of the NFL teams out there. Just saying.
And so I'm going to have to step in and say, first of all, to be clear, I am not an Alabama fan. Just because I live in Alabama doesn't make me an Alabama fan. However, the teammanship that I saw in that game where these guys are coming back from playing hurt and trying to get into the game and the unselfish attitude, I have never seen probably a more team-centric team than what I saw on the field that night, for sure.
Yeah. It's an amazing, what they've been able to do. I often say, we can talk about this topic at a later time, but, I think Nick Saban really has the toughest leadership job there is in America because he's taking the best of the best athletes and convincing them they're not good enough to win so he can keep them on edge, right? So that they can't let their guard down because they're going to get everybody's best game every single week. And what they did this past year, Rick, you're right. Great team. They definitely broke average. For sure. These teams win consistently. You can look at the Golden State Warriors of recent years, the Chicago Bulls back when we were, growing up and younger. But as we work our way through the Breaking Average book, Paul, we're going to share these critical factors for creating and being a team that can do that, that can break average. And today we're going to look at the first step of vision, the V word, as you mentioned earlier. We're going to dive deep into the framework of victory, that whole acrostic, those 7 critical factors. And then today, the element of dare to dream. Paul, before we talk about dare to dream, I want you to share the story of the Olympic rowing team that you talked about in the beginning of the book, because I think it's critical to set us up for where we're going.
Yeah, the opening story centers on what happened in 1936. It's the Berlin Games, and just imagine that, right? It's pre-World War II. That's got all the propaganda of Nazi Germany. I mean, they were setting the stage, Hitler and his entourage. And certainly, we know the 36 games for what Jesse Owens did. Fantastic. 4 gold medals, like 9 world records or whatever it was. Unbelievable. But there was another group of athletes just across the city at a lake that was rowing in the competition there. And I think that is one of the most amazing stories, sports stories. I know we talk about the 1980 Olympic, the miracle on ice, but this may actually trump the 1980 Olympic experience, right? So you've got 75,000 people. Hitler's there even watching this from the stands. And Team USA is represented by a bunch of amateurs. And I know what they say, well, weren't all the athletes amateurs? Well, kind of, but not really. These were true amateurs. They're all like under 22. The rest of the teams had guys that had been doing it for a few years. They were experienced. They were essentially professionals in the sport. So we had no chance at all. And they came out of the University of Washington, and their coach, Coach Uberson, unbelievable. We talked about Saban. We talked about really great coaching. Just the story, and it's a great lesson in breaking average. It sets the framework, I think, for what we're talking about in this book, Breaking Average, what we're talking about in this podcast. And so certainly I want to unpack that. I want to encourage our listeners, read the story in Breaking Average. I'm not going to give it all away here in this podcast, but just read it. It's really phenomenal. And what we learn from that is that a team and a coach, they can set the framework. They can work together, and there's a pattern out of it, and a pattern that we all can model and use. And so, we as leaders and followers and teams, those are the 7 critical factors that come out of it, right? Vision, insight, collaboration, trust, ownership, resilience, and this thing that we call the yes factor. Those are all important. But it starts with vision, that big, hairy, audacious goal, the moonshots, those kind of things. We got to have a vision as leaders, and the team needs that vision. So that's where it starts.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, Paul. And it is a great story that you need to go read. I did not know it before Paul shared it with me. And so, Paul, I wasn't a very good history student, right? So thanks for being my history teacher. And I think that's your word this year, right? Teacher? Maybe, or something like that. Connector. What is your word? What is your word for this? Your connector, connecting history to those of us who weren't good students, right? And I love how you use that story to set the whole book up and move us forward. What I want to do now is, we've already heard from Rick, the fine Tennessee Volunteer fan. He made it clear he's not an Alabama fan, so I thought I'd let our listeners know he's really a Tennessee Volunteer fan, which is almost as bad as being a Razorback fan. They've just had a little bit better history. So we'll hear more from Rick. But Diane, I want to bring you on board. How are you doing this fine January day?
I am entertained by you 3, as I always am. Clearly, I need to up my football game, but I am a New England Patriots fan. I am a Rhode Islander. So in New England, if you're not, a Pats fan, then you're kind of ostracized. You're either a Pats fan or a Giants fan. I am a Pats fan, but I don't watch football nearly as much as you boys do. So
Well, we'll keep you on your toes and kind of force you to watch a little bit more as we continue to break average, and then you keep us on our toes by bringing different stories, a different perspective for sure. Why don't you talk to us a little bit, Diane, about the critical elements, the 3 elements of this factor of vision that we're going to talk about over the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, I love it. And I just never really thought about breaking vision down the way it's broken down. So it's those three critical elements. And the first one is dreaming it. That vision is led by one or more pioneers who dare to dream. And I love the one or more part, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then the vision needs to be defined and documented so that others are willing to declare it. So the second one is declaring it. Dream it, declare it, and then delivering it, right? A dream is nothing if it's not delivered. So we need to have that vision needs to be pursued by a community of people who are willing to sacrifice to deliver. It's that action oriented part of it. And so I love how the vision's broken down into those critical pieces.
Yeah, this is going to be fun as we go forward. The vision, the critical factor of vision, we're going to break it down into those three elements as Diane just shared with us to help you, the Breaking Average listener, take those three elements and apply in your own life. Today, we're also going to focus on some critical pieces from this idea of dreaming it. Rick, why don't you add to the story here a little bit as we continue to go forward?
For sure. So Tony Dungy said that the first step towards creating an improved future is developing the ability to envision it. And without vision, like, how do we know where we're going? And I think we're going to get into some pretty good elements of that, of why vision itself is so important. But first, we've got to figure out where it is that we want to go, right? We've got to be able to dream it. We've got to be able to see it before any of these other steps can even come true.
Yeah, that's so good. And there's that football guy again, Tony Dungy, right? Diane, maybe you could bring us some female's perspective, a female quote on vision. I'm sure Mary Kay Ash. I know there's a great quote by Mary Kay Ash on vision. I don't know it off the top of my head.
There's a female quote from the great leader Katie Holmes, who says, "We all keep dreaming, and luckily dreams come true." So
the great leader, Katie Holmes. There we go. Thanks. I knew, Diane, I was thinking you'd bring something, but leave it to Rick, to bring it in. That's good. That's good. Paul, I know, we want to continue to talk. Why don't you share a little bit about where we're going?
Yeah. So, here's the thing, guys. We love interviewing leaders and having conversations with them, and just taking time just to sit down with them and asking them the story, what is breaking average to you? And, what are the things that you do it? And so we're excited about those opportunities. And if you know a leader that has done that, has led a team and who's casted a vision, and, we would love to interview them. So just go to our site, go to breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader. And we have a super simple, safe way for you to kind of share that info. We'd love to get it. So just go to breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader.
Yeah. So if you're listening, thank you, Paul. If you're listening to the Breaking Average podcast, just thinking about leaders who have shared great vision, right? We'd love to talk to those leaders, or maybe these 7 critical factors that we're going to talk about over the next few weeks. If you know leaders that we could talk to, that's who we're looking for. So thanks, Paul, for bringing that up. Also, we have a pretty awesome sponsor today. Paul, why don't you share a little bit about our sponsor today?
We do. I'm excited about this one too. And, I've known Rick for a few years, and he is our sponsor today. So today's episode is sponsored by Rick Morris. Thank you, Rick. And here's a question that I love, right? Everybody wants to succeed, but do they have the will to succeed? And that question really hit me. I thought it was a solid question. Rick really kind of set that up on his website. I was looking at it. It's a great question, Rick. And a couple thoughts here, guys. Do you want to become the strategic resource that organizations need? Do you want to be the positive influence that can change a corporate culture from within? Those are powerful questions. And thirdly, do you want to make dreams come true for other people and organizations? And I love those questions. And this is where Rick can kind of step in and help you and be a guide for you. We'll encourage you guys to let Rick be a guide. He's got a great site, great resources on this site. Rick and his resources, he'll shape you to be a greater influencer, share with you the tools that you need to plan, lead, change your want into will, which I love that, right? That statement earlier. Everybody wants to succeed, but do they have the will to succeed? do you have the will to succeed? Rick's going to help you with that. Just go to rickamorris.com. That's rickamorris.com. No hyphens, all one word. And get instant access to his Project Management That Works Masterclass, which is based on his book of the same name. And that book looks really interesting, Rick. Thank you for sponsoring today's show.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome, Paul and Rick. I want to make sure our listeners understand that's Rick A, the letter A, not like we say in Arkansas, Rick A. It's Rick A, the letter A, Morris.com. And Rick, I don't want to steal your thunder. I can't do this yet, but Rick is certainly, I've gotten to know Rick over the last several years, brings a lot of talent to the world. He's working on a major project right now. Can't share it yet, I know, but a major project right now for a really big name that you all are going to know. I'm excited for you to roll that out, Rick. That's going to be something special and big. So thanks for being our sponsor of the Breaking Average podcast today. So let's jump into the next portion of our show. We want to talk about this idea of the element of dreaming it, right? So we're talking about vision. We're going to move into some discussion around dreaming it and why dreaming it is so important. Why does it matter for us as leaders, for us as teams to move people forward? Rick, let's start with you on this topic. Why does dreaming it matter? Why, and then, what is it? And then why does it matter for leaders of the world today?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite topics. In fact, it became a mantra for my profession of project management. It's, if you ever ask a project manager what they do for a living, it's literally the most boring description and explanation you'll get back. We can lose a conversation in about 30 seconds. So I had to teach a mantra to project managers, and that's simply that we make dreams come true. And so when we start talking about what dream it means, we all have dreams and we all have visions of grandeur in our lives and our families, and we have wishes and wants. And if wishing and wanting were enough, then we would all be, mega rich and, and successful, but it's not, right? Pioneers are the ones that take the first step. Like I've had a chance to be a part of some really cool things. Like you said, we've got a great project that's running right now. I can't wait for that to be realized. But essentially, I've gotten a chance to be on the sidelines and become the tactical resource that helps other dreams come true. But I'm always fascinated by where the dream came from. I'm always fascinated by that pioneering vision. Like it's cool. I can take credit for certain things, right? Of realizing the dream. But when somebody says, this is what I want to do, I'm always like, where did you even come up with that? That's awesome. So a dream itself really is an unrealized vision, right? In fact, when we think of the word dream itself, when you dream at night, there's actually health benefits to dreaming. You could do all kinds of research, but when you're having a dream at night and you try to wake up the next morning and you try to explain the dream to somebody, right? It never makes sense, but it felt so real to you. It was so amazing. And our brain is often controlled by logic, right? But when we dream, it becomes ways that our brain stores information, but it also fuses and blends together information in abstract and highly novel ways. So that's what a conscious dream is, right? When somebody says, I have a dream, they're changing the norm, and it's fusing together information in highly novel new ways. But that's really only half the battle, right? How many dreams have been unrealized? So the only way dreams become real or become true is with action. And to me, pioneers are people who are unafraid to take that first step.
That's good. Yeah, I love that. You gotta dream it, right? And we're getting ready in the U.S. to celebrate Martin Luther King's birthday, and his famous speech of I have a dream speech, right? And the other two. I think this is what Paul's done brilliant with this book is, he's talked about the critical factors, but then the elements that make those up. The other two elements that we're going to talk about is really what propels the dream forward. And we won't get into those in this conversation, but I'm looking forward to being able to do that as we move forward. Dan, what about you? What is a dream and why is it important from your perspective for leaders today?
Yeah, because that's where it starts, to Rick's point, the vision has to come from somewhere. And, the part of the question you had asked was, what's a great pioneer that we all know? Well, the four of us are together because of a vision we were brought together by a landscaper, a janitor, and a preacher, really, before the John Maxwell team was formed. And it was an idea that Paul Martinelli had, where we're sitting on the Empowered Living show, that he really wanted to impact thousands and thousands of lives. And John had the influence in some of the ideas. So he brought those two pieces together, and Scott was the connector. So when there's that dream there, once you're starting to talk about it and you're putting it out there, then things start to happen, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And you had talked, Mike, that this weekend, as we're getting ready to celebrate Martin Luther King, what's another pioneer where we all understand, and how when he stood on the steps and started to talk about the dream that he had, he painted a picture. But we're getting into declaring that. And so we're not going to talk about that right now. But, we have to have that imagination. We need to actually allow ourselves to think forward and to focus forward.
Yeah. I like this idea, this discussion around dream. And I know Paul's going to bring some perspective in. He'll probably even, I may steal his thunder, I hope not here, but I love the word imagineering. There's a book that Andy Stanley wrote. I believe, Paul, you may know for sure. I think it's Imagineering. And he talks about, you got to engineer. It's kind of taking the dream from out of our head into reality, right? It's being an Imagineer. And Rick is a big Disney guy. Walt Disney was one of the greatest dreamers in the world, right? And the dream that is realized today. So it begins. This is why dreaming to me is important, right? It's got to come. Oftentimes, we've all heard this before. Dreams happen in bed, right? We have these dreams, but we got to get up and share those dreams with others. Get that dream out of our head onto a piece of paper. And begin to move forward. But it begins with the dream. This is why dreaming matters. And then as a leader, you also have to share that dream with others and get others bought into that dream, as Diane talked about, the three people that really connected us but for the dream. I would never probably know Paul or Diane. Maybe I know Rick, but only because we have an interest in SEC football and SEC sports. Maybe we cross paths because of that. But the odds were highly unlikely, right? And so that's what why dreaming is really important. It starts bringing the creative forces together. Rick's got skills I don't have. Paul has skills I don't have. Diane has skills I don't have. But all four of us together are able to use those skills and talents to begin to move the dream forward. Paul, you wrote the book. Tell us more from your perspective, this whole idea of why dreaming what dreaming it is, and then why it's important for leaders to use to move forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I would say others wrote it. I captured it, and I had some help capturing it, and the book is a playbook. Think of it in that way, right? So the process was, what if we had a playbook to really execute to, so that we could really be efficient and effective and break average, right? What can we do? And the subtitle talks about this team strong leadership aspect. And so this playbook is based on real world experiences. That's why there's stories in there, real stories, they're patterns. And when we can find patterns that work, like, wow, we can leverage that pattern and use that in our lives. That allows us to be able to move forward. We're going to be talking about this probably in the next podcast, but one of the patterns, the stories, is the birth of our nation. There's some patterns in there that we can learn from. Certainly the patterns of Coach Ubrickson and the University of Washington men's 8 rowing team in the 36 Olympic Games. There's some patterns in there. There's patterns throughout. And that's what we try to do, is pull those out. That's why we're having these conversations. We wanted to share some of those patterns. But whatever it is, whether it's the birth of a nation or a championship sports team or building a successful company, it's leveraging those patterns. And teamwork starts with vision. It starts with vision, and a vision that reflects a dream of a leader, maybe a set of leaders, but also a set of contributors. And I love that word, contributors. We talk about it in the book. That don't think of your employees as employees. Think of them as contributors. They want to contribute. So therefore, think of them as contributors, and then they can contribute. Think about it, right? Every vision realized because of the contributions of other people. So you have contributors on your team. So there are things, that keep us from fully capturing our vision. And so we're talking about what we need to do to capture our vision. But keep in mind that there are enemies out of the gates. There are gremlins in our way that will try to thwart you and stop you. And, from the second grade teacher that says, stop daydreaming. And we're told not to dream, right? Early on, we dream all the time. Early on, we're playing with our little Lego pieces and our figure, our GI Joes or whatever it is. I don't know what, Diane, I'm sure they had stuff. You're dreaming, you're imagining, and you use that word imagine, and never stop. So yeah, I just say we've got to shake loose of those gremlins, and leaders lead because they dream. In fact, I've never met a true leader who doesn't dream, right? Because if they don't dream, if they don't take a risk, then they're not leading. How are they leading if they're not dreaming? So that's my thoughts. There's so much more.
Yeah, I
think that sets the table for what you asked.
Yeah, I think so too, Paul. And I love, there's several things we could pull apart there that you shared. I do believe it does begin with a leader that can dream, right? I mean, the leader that stays stuck in the way we've always done it, they can't inspire people, right? And it's that dream that inspires people. And it inspires the contributors. I love that word contributors, Paul, that you brought to the table. It's how can I get people to contribute to the dream? They have skills I don't have. They have experiences I don't have. and I certainly appreciate you bringing in my second grade teacher. I had nightmares when you said she was yelling, quit daydreaming, Harbor, and back then it was daydreaming. Today we maybe call it ADHD, right? Because they can't focus or those kind of things. But again, I don't want to digress into that. It's the dreamers that really make the world happen. I just think of some of the great dreamers in our lifetime, right? Like Steve Jobs, who's no longer with us. I think of Elon Musk today. What a dreamer that dude is, man. And the things that he's doing in the world. And of course, there's many others. And we've all had dreams. It gives us energy. Like it gives us energy to do something, right? I mean, I think back to my childhood. I wanted to be a baseball player, or maybe I wanted to be Evel Knievel. Rick, maybe you did this. I'd get on my bicycle. I'd put my little plastic football helmet on, that couldn't protect anybody, but that was my motorcycle helmet. I'd make a ramp out of a 2x4 that, my dad had laying around, and I was Evel Knievel, and I was ramping about 2 feet, right? And I thought I was Evel Knievel. And so we have those dreams, but that dream gives us energy to create. I was creating a ramp, and I was creating this Grand Canyon that I was jumping across, or whatever it is, whoever I was trying to be back then. So certainly those things are fun to remember. Let's talk about how we cultivate dreams, though, because the dream is important. Now, how do we cultivate it in others, like the contributors that Paul talked about? Diane, let's start with you this time.
Yeah. And you had me cracking up, Mike, with your whole Evel Knievel. I could see like the cape on the back of you.
Oh yeah.
So from my imagination, it was Wonder Woman. I loved to have a lasso of truth around me. And the leader as the vision holder, right? When Mike, you talked about it, the way we've always done it, like that, those are fingernails on a chalkboard to me. And going back to our school days, it was my high school vice principal who said, we all walk around suffering from Tawati disease. And I looked at him and I'm like, what did you just say? And he's like, the way we've always done it. It's a disease. 69% of us, the rest of us, we talk about death, 69% of us love security, love status quo. And when we as leaders have this vision that is disrupting that and making people so uncomfortable, it's our job to just say, hey, we know that this is uncomfortable. We know, to the point that you were talking about, Mark. Who's Mark? Paul.
I've been called worse.
Those fears that come up as a leader, we need to acknowledge them. We know that we're doing something different. We know that it's uncomfortable. And even for us, as we're starting to share our vision, it's scary for us. And we just need to keep stepping into that and talking and acknowledging those gremlins that are in our face and really refining the conversation as we start to share the vision more and more.
Yeah. Diane, I love that new word you taught us. That sounds like a great Arkansas word, Tawati.
Yes.
Tawati. Tell us how to spell Tawadi and what it means again.
TWWADI, the way we always do it or did
I love
it.
Yeah, I love it. That's a great new word that you've taught me today. I'm going to put in my dictionary because, I think you got to have great words in the South, as we call them. Fantastic. Love that word. Love that example. And hey, let me ask you a question, Dan. You brought up Wonder Woman. Have you seen the new Wonder Woman?
I have not watched the newest one yet. No.
I haven't either. I want to see it. It looks fantastic.
Yeah, 1984. It's fantastic, actually. I went in hoping it was going to be good and was very pleasantly surprised by it. I think it's a fantastic movie.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, Rick, for sharing it. Rick, why don't you, since you're jumped in here, talk about cultivating dreams in others, and maybe you could bring some ideas from that movie since you've already don't steal our thunder though. I want to see the movie.
No, I'm not going to. But tons of great 80s references, so that I think that made it fun as well, right? It's 1984, so they take some tongue-in-cheek shots at the 80s and fashion of the 80s and that kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun. Coming back to Tawadi disease, which is going to take over this podcast now, that's something as a consultant we deal with all the time. And my stock answer for that is, are you sure? Right? They'll say, well, that's the way we've always done it. Are you sure? Always. Like, when was this company founded? Right. So I'll play that game. Like, all right, so this company, it was a GE. This company was founded like in the 1800s, 1900s. You sure that's the way they've always done it? Or have things changed with the advent of technology? I was like, I challenge you to think of it this way. Is it the way you've always done it? Or was it the way you were trained on day one and you've been unafraid to challenge, question, or try to be better? Right. Those are the things that I love to get into when we start talking about Tawadi. When we talk about dreaming, the right T.E. Lawrence said, all men dream, but not equally. Those who dream by night in the dusty recesses of their minds wake in the day to find that it was vanity. But the dreamers of the day are dangerous men, for they act on their dreams with open eyes to make them possible. Mm-hmm. And the one of the biggest things I think about a dream is the fact that so many phenomenal dreams have been left right in someone's head. Out of fear, out of the gremlins, out of the immediate discussion in our brains that say, that's never going to work. That's a dumb idea. You brought up Steve Jobs, one of my favorite comic bits I've ever seen, right? Says, Steve Jobs up there taking accountability for everything that's done. He says, basically, he just walked in a room and says, I want all of those albums over there on a device that looks like this. Let's go. Right. And he goes, and then all those people did it. But as much as you want to make fun of that, and I thought that was hilarious when I heard it the first time, still somebody had to have the idea that we could store all of our music on a really small device. And it changed the entire industry. I mean, the entire industry has changed because somebody said, I don't want to carry around the going back to the 80s, the big boom box that was cool. It weighed 85 pounds. Then we went to the Walkman, right? The tape deck, right? Then we went to the CD player, but you couldn't run with that because it would just skip all over the place down to MP3. But that movement to the iPad or to the iPod, for that matter, changed an entire industry in the way that we listen to music, down to the way artists are compensated. They're now paid based on streams on Spotify, not album sales. It's incredible. And it all comes back to somebody declaring or saying something as silly as, I want to listen to my entire music collection on a device this small. So I think it's really, really important, not only to dream, but to encourage others to talk about their dreams in order to start to get that vision to become reality.
Yeah, I love that, Rick. It's always the dreamer never really creates the dream, right? It's always someone else. I mean, I think of Elon Musk. I mean, he's not the engineer, right? He's not the one doing all the SpaceX rockets and the technology they've built to shoot a rocket into space and re-land it. He's not the guy creating that. It's someone. It's the contributor, as Paul said. I love those stories and getting away from Tawadi. We're gonna keep using that word. We're gonna bring, like, how many times can we add Tawadi to the podcast today? Paul, how about you? And Paul, it's not about Tawadi. Don't do it the way you've always done it. To share something different in this portion of Cultivating Dreams.
Yeah, I'm going to be challenged by that. So thank you, Diane. I'm going to have to use that in my quarterly business review. Everybody's going to go like, Twatty? What is Twatty? The way we've always done it. Can't do it that way. Right. Yeah. So you asked the question, how do we cultivate our dreams and others? And I would start with this. It's cultivating the values. Right. So when we're with like-minded people, we're like-minded because we share common values. Maybe not every value in the world, but we've got common values. And when we can be with a group of other folks who are going to be contributors, if we're leading them, and there's a common set of values that we have, then we can lead them on a dream, right? We can share a vision. So when we have clear values, we can have a clear vision. So there's this tight connection here, I think, that's really important, of values and vision. If there's a vision that somebody's casting, well, it's tied to values, and they're going to buy into your vision if they buy into your values. That's the critical thing. So, and I love this idea of sparking the imagination. You mentioned imagination earlier. We talked about Disney, imagination. Imagination is the most powerful tool we've got. It's a muscle. And we need to leverage and use it, continually use it, and I think it's, if you're a person of faith, it's a powerful tool. It's part of when you're praying, you're actually leveraging your imagination. It says in there to paint that picture of what faith is, being certain of what you hope for, even though you can't see it. Right. So here's the deal. I think you got to ask questions of your team. All right. You can ask the value questions. What are your values? I love asking that question. Then you can kind of take them further and say, hey, what if you knew you couldn't fail? What if we knew we couldn't fail? Right? Because a lot of times this is where the gremlins come up, right? We think about, well, we've never done it this way, Twatty. We got the fear, we got the doubt. There's all those other elements. There's perfection, procrastination. I mean, there's so many gremlins that we could talk about. But if we ask that question, what if we knew we couldn't fail? What would stop you? Well, if I knew I couldn't fail, nothing would stop me. Then go, do it. And what would you do? You can ask that question too. What is it that you would do if you knew you couldn't fail? And that's a powerful kind of question to get people up out of their chair. That excites the leader, but it also brings in the contributors. Those are some thoughts in terms of how to transfer it. How about you, Mike?
Yeah, that's good. Man, we could go a lot of different directions. I think it begins with story. When we want to cultivate the dream, it begins with story. I think back, recently in the end of 2020, we did a series around movies, and our winner for that was Remember the Titans. And I think, one of the greatest scenes in that movie was when Denzel Washington, Coach Boone, took the players out to the Civil War graveyard, right? And use that story to bring his team together. One of my favorite motivational speeches ever was given by Al Pacino in a movie called Any Given Sunday. I don't know if y'all have ever seen that movie.
Oh yeah.
And Rick, you probably remember the scene in the locker room where he's telling kind of his life story. And I can't use his language on this podcast, but where I've lost everybody that's ever meant anything to me, right? I've done all these things. And at the end, he says, either we heal together or we die as individuals, right? There's something to that point. And what he's trying to do is inspire. His team is failing. They're not winning. And he gives this great locker room speech. And it's just a fantastic scene. There's another movie, Facing the Giants, where the coach brings the kid out where he's a complainer, right? And he has him do the death crawl. He uses that. It's an example, but he's used it in story form. And all of a sudden you see this team stand up from the sidelines and start coming alongside their teammate, right? Because he's chasing after this dream. And I think it just begins with story. As a leader, you've got to become a great storyteller. You've got to use story to pull. You can't just say, we got to go get this. Use story to cultivate this dream and inspire this, because we all dream, right? We all have this kid within us that dreams and wants to be something bigger. And I think that, Paul, is what you did at the beginning of the book and telling the story of the rowing team, to launch us into this idea of breaking average. And as leaders, I think we could all get better at that. Even me, I could get better at that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we could spend probably a couple more hours talking about dreaming it, but we need to move on, Paul. And I want to jump into our tip and challenge portion. But before we do that, once again, I want to thank our sponsor, Rick, Rick A. Morris.com. Make sure you visit rickAmorris.com. If you have a project that you're really trying to move to that next level, maybe you're just stuck, you need a partner. Look to Rick. I know Rick brings great talent, skill. He's kind of the, what you may not know, listeners and viewers on the Empowered Living Show, Rick's the one that makes us look good. We get on here and we talk about our ideas, but Rick is the guy behind the scenes, putting the podcast and the video together to make us look good, sound good as best he can with my accent. I know that he probably struggles with me the most, but Rick, RICKA, the letter A, Morris.com. If you've got a project that you need to move to the next level, or if you're working with a client, maybe you're a coach, a speaker, a trainer, you have a client that you're working with that they have a project they need to move forward. Rick's your guy to be able to do that. Diane, any closing ideas or thoughts before we move on?
As the leader, we're holding the vision and we are going to continue to talk about it. And we're always going to, any time that Tawati disease comes up, ask the question, what else is possible? Just what else is possible?
What else is possible? Rid yourself of Tawati disease. Mm-hmm. What's the cure for Tawati disease? Asking the right questions, right?
Right. What else is possible?
That's right. Rick, what about you, my friend?
Yeah, the first step in realizing a dream is to actually take the first step, is to be unafraid to take the very first step.
Taking the first step, that's key. I know some of the biggest realized dreams of my life, Rick, are when I finally decided to take that first step, right? And not one of the greatest lessons Martinelli ever taught me was the terror barrier lesson, right? Like just step across that line. Again, so thank you, Rick, for that. Paul, let's move into your tip and challenge portion of the show. What's your tip and challenge for our listeners today?
Yeah, I like that first step element, and let's give you a tip and a challenge. That's really that first step initiative. Einstein says this, and this is powerful. Imagination is everything. We talked about that earlier. He says that it's the preview of life's coming attractions. So if you take a few minutes just to start thinking about, okay, what's possible? Cast away the limiting beliefs. We're going to be talking about that probably in another podcast, because there are limiting beliefs that will stop you, and there's Tawati disease that will kill you. But don't do that. Just take time to imagine what's possible, and journal. I would just grab a notepad, notebook, anything that you've got, something like this, and just start journaling. What's possible? What are the things that you want to do? What are your values? Start with that. I would actually, you could start with this. I have a dream. Start with those first 4 words. I have a dream, and then fill out the rest. What is that dream? Write your I have a dream speech out. Just your thoughts. You don't have to give the speech. You just need to write it down. Declare it, right? And we're going to be talking about declaring it here shortly, but it starts with that first step. How about you, Mike?
Yeah, so good, Paul. Love it. I had a tip and challenge plan for today's show, but then Diane taught me a new word, Tawati. So I'm gonna punt on my original. And the tip is this: learn that word, TWWADI. Write it down, and get familiar with it. And then the challenge is this, and this is what I use a lot. I use I teach my coaching clients to get real. Get real about Tawati. What's holding you back? Mm-hmm. Get real about the things that you've always done, but you're wanting different results, right? Aristotle said doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is insanity. So get real about the things that are holding you back, the way you've always done it, and then make a plan to do it different, to take that first step, to live out that dream that Paul shared with us. Take that first step, as Rick shared with us, and rid yourself of Tawati disease that Diane shared with us. Paul, that's my tip and challenge.
Hey, we want to thank our sponsor again for today's show, Rick Morris. And I love this thought, enable the value of influence. And Rick's going to be a guide to help you in that, to enable the value of your influence. Just visit rickamorris.com. Not Ricky Morris, but rickamorris.com. Also, if you want to be featured and highlighted on the show as a sponsor, please reach out to us at the email link that if you go to the website, you'll see it, or in the show notes. Just visit the website, breakingaveragepodcast.com. We would love to hear from you and discuss how we can make this mutually beneficial. So this has been fun.
Yeah, I love that sponsor. It reminds me of a song. Hey, Ricky, you so fine. You so fine. You're on my mind. Hey, Ricky. That's what we want you to think about our sponsor today. Ricky, be on your mind. Rick, cut that out of the show, man.
Never.
Hey, great conversation today, Paul. We're always looking for leaders that we can interview on the Breaking Average podcast to help us push this idea of vision dreaming forward. So make sure you visit breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader. Share those leaders with us. Or if you don't have a copy of the book, Breaking Average, 7 Critical Factors to Team Strong Leadership, make sure you go to breakingaveragebook.com and grab a copy of the book as well. Thanks for tuning in to the Breaking Average podcast and the Empowered Living Show as well. We'll see you on the next episode of the Breaking Average podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R2 Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.